Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff have read it. What are your experiences with people waking from anesthesia? Story 1. Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in a hospital room bed, waiting for surgery. They already gave me meds to calm me, but they knocked me out. 2 nurses come in to move me to a gurney, but they were small and I'm big. They can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs saying, "You're snoring, roll over." And I rolled right onto the gurney. Story 2. Not a doctor. Our friend was in a car accident. Pretty bad. He was in a coma for 2 months. He had a female doctor. For 2 months until he came out of his coma, every time his doctor was checking on, he would reach up and grab her breast, guessing he heard her voice. When we told him about it, he did not believe us. So he asked her and she confirmed it, said she never stopped him because it seemed to keep him calm. Story 3. Apparently before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist and said in my best Connery, "Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk?" The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone asked him in a haze. "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to sleep." Story 4. I was the patient, but I think this qualifies. Colonoscopy. In this big lounge chair, still half asleep in recovery, I half roll over and let rip the biggest fart in history. The devil himself created this one. I open half an eye at the nurse and ask, "Was that me?" With her jaw on the ground, she nods and I go back to sleep. You have to fart after the colonoscopy or they don't let you go home. Give back the air or we'll call the police. Story 5. My fiancé recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes, she told her mother, "Now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his dong in my mouth." It was awkward. Story 6. So I'm an ER tech, and we have this regular that comes in all the time. She's an old black lady who has a lot of health issues, including dementia. This time I'm actually not entirely sure why she was coming in, but whatever it was, she needed to be intubated. So we sedated her, put the tube in, and did what we needed. When everything was finished, we called EMS to pick her up and take her back home. When they arrived, the nurse and I went in to prepare her to leave. The lady is just starting to wake up from sedation, so with the EMT standing in the room, we take out her Foley catheter. Then she queefs. The nurse and I smirk at each other, but this is fairly common and not the funny part. The funny part is that the noise seemed to surprise her and apparently remind her what was going on, because she gasps and then looks over to the EMTs and says in an attempt at a sexy voice, "You boys ever see a black coochie before?" Everyone in the room had to take a second to attempt to regain composure, but the EMTs ended up having to leave the room and the nurse was crouching on the ground trying not to die. I, since I have the Foley in my hands, don't have this freedom, and am forced to try to keep my sides from launching into orbit. It's since become a running joke around the ER. Story 7. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm, so I hadn't been in a ward, etc., prior to the operation. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, "Sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We're in the morgue." Hopefully they didn't hear you. That could have been the start of a zombie apocalypse. Story 8. Had a patient in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we place a speculum, think ball gag, but a metal ring instead of a ball, in the mouth through which to pass the scope so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they're under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the Safeword was before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole ER erupted in laughter. 50 Shades of Grey's Anatomy. Story 9. I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she's always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag, and wants to bang her husband. She was just going off, and sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This was probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. Story 10. I had to get hardware installed in my leg for a nasty bone break at an overseas base. A few days later, my buddy and I were having lunch on the base. A group of women came in and sat down at the table next to us and we struck up a conversation. One of them asked what I had gotten done. I was in a huge cast and on crutches. I told her the procedure. She got a funny look on her face and asked when it was done. I told her the date. She immediately starts laughing and tells her friends, "This is the guy." Now they're all howling with laughter. It took a while to tell the story because they were in tears from laughing. Apparently, when I was coming out of sedation, I grabbed a corpsman's act and hung on for dear life. The woman I was currently talking to at the restaurant. I just wanted to crawl into a hole when I heard the story. Story 11. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations, and I had an old guy wake up. The first thing he asked was, "Do you still have my balls?" I told him, "Yep, both of them." And he said, "Both? Oh, you guys are great." I like to imagine he only had one ball and was thrilled to hear that you gave him a new one. Or better yet, that he started with 3. Hey, also, if you didn't know yet, me and a couple of my friends just launched Rufus rugs. Premium, custom, hand-tufted rugs. Maybe you're just a fan of Naruto and want to show it off. Or maybe you just love Pokemon and want bus toys on display for everyone. Either way, we can make almost anything. So hit the first link in the description to learn more. Story 12. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mom was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my balls are itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down to my skin so I can scratch my balls. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hands run down in excess of smooth skin. Then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around and come to the conclusion that someone has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, "Oh, Mom, they've shaved my pubes. I'm not happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's not right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes." My mother was mortified, and she's trying to get me to calm down while laughing and trying to avoid a scene. They grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the same time, it was a serious issue. Everything just sounds better in a Scottish accent. Story 13. My BFF had a vasectomy, and when he was first given the meds, 3 nurses walked in that were rather attractive. He looks up with his wife in the room and says, "If I would have known there were going to be hot women in here, I would have worn my big dong." He wasn't put under, just given meds to relax him. I'm guessing Valium or something equivalent, and he's one funny guy to begin with. When the surgery was over, the doctor was telling him he needed to 10 times before he was sterile. As he was being wheeled out of the waiting room in front of little kids, he was demanding a prescription for head. Probably my proudest moment of him. His wife, still to this day, loves to bring up the story. Story 14. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady, like 350 plus pounds. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model. Why don't you just come home with me and my wife?" Yes, he was propositioning a 3-way with a 50-year-old, 350-pound nurse. The most awkward moment of my life. Even out of his mind, he wouldn't even consider the thought of not including you. True love right there. Story 15. Nurse here. This really big, hairy Turkish guy, whom I've never met before, told me how much he loved me and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male, by the way. He wanted to kiss you. Just as I want you to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more interesting stories. Now back to the program. Story 16. My father-in-law was in a car accident that needed surgery. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam. He was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told her that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon, she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked, and the nurse explained that he destroyed the restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. Story 17. Not a hospital staff, my great-grandfather had surgery one time, and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran and was convinced that he was in a POW camp. He recognized me and told me I had to help him escape by getting the guards, nurses, because he knew I knew how to hurt people. I was 16, obviously a trained. When the nurse came in, he was calm and kept motioning with his head at her to me and finally looked at me and said, "Get her, now!" She always came back with another male nurse after that. "Hey, old man, remember that unforgettable moment when you encouraged me to exterminate the entire hospital staff? Good times, huh?" Story 18. I was the patient. I had had all 4 wisdom teeth out at once, and I woke up earlier than expected in recovery. Early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking and panicked. I leaped off the bed and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them and definitely gave one of them a good punch before they got me back in the bed. I passed out again straight away. Story 19. Not the doctor or the nurse. I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger. In my final time, I was about 7, I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cue the following conversation. Me. "Why is the Rugrats on?" Doctor. "You woke up earlier and said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats. We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry." Me. "Why did I want to be angry?" Doctor. "You said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time. Are you still a happy person, or did the Rugrats ruin you?" Story 20. In 91, I had my appendix out, but there was a complication. Instead of being inflamed and ready to burst, they found my appendix dead and shriveled. The doctor doing the surgery had to feel around to find where to make a second incision. The problem is that I was in the operating room for so long that I built up a tolerance to the anesthesia that I woke up. As I started to sit up, all hands came out of me and the nurse forced my head down, making me look at the ceiling. I thought this was a dream from the meds they gave me, but my doctor later confirmed that this actually happened. The anesthesiologist decided to up the dosage of the anesthesia to an adult level, then double an adult level, and I finally fell back asleep. Because of the high dosage they gave me, my arms and legs twitched, and I almost turned over on my side. They had to grab straps and strap me down to the bed, including my head. I do not remember it, but the doctor, who was my family doctor until the day he died, told me that I woke up 3 more times during the operation, and one time I saw my open wounds and freaked the hell out. After that, they strapped my head to the table. The anesthesiologist refused to give me any larger doses of the meds because I was at danger levels for an adult. I was a child and it was not working on me. Ever since then, I've had to be prescribed large doses of anything or it will not work. Dental work had to be done with both local and gas as well. Because of this, with the exception of heartburn meds and antibiotics, medicine is something I usually do not take because it does not work on me well unless I take large doses. Also, I'm in medical journals, as this was the first recorded occurrence of this happening in the United States in modern history. It happened a few times a year or so before mine in some European countries as well, but this was before the days of even dial-up being common in hospitals. They had to call in a specialist who just happened to see this once before and knew where to look. My 1 to 2 hour surgery turned into an 8-hour ordeal. Story 21. I have a nice sister of a friend story. She was getting her wisdom teeth removed, and after they took them out, they just sewed up the holes they were in. Now she came out of anesthesia, but she was still groggy and super out of it. While they were in the car going home, she reached into her mouth, touched the stumps and got blood on her fingers, and then reached up and gave her the double football stripe look, pulled her blanket over her head and said, "I'm a warrior." I got nothing better to do, so let's share the story about the other sister when she got her wisdom teeth removed. Some backstory. Her family's from French Canada and she lived there until 6 years old. She vividly remembers waking up from surgery, sobbing. When questioned why she was crying, she explained in French that she missed her homeland of Canada and wanted the snow. Then she stopped crying and started apologizing. Apologizing for crying. Such a Canadian thing to do. Story 22. I shadowed a surgery once with this guy who woke up saying, "Give it to me straight, doc. Will I ever play the piano again?" All of us were cracking up and then he goes, "Oh, wait, I don't know how to play the piano." Story 23. I'm not a doctor or nurse, but I heard about this after my wisdom teeth surgery. I apparently was still in anesthesia, and when they wheeled me out, I had both arms stuck out and was making plane noises. They asked me what I was doing, and I told them I was becoming my final form of a plane. Still do not know why I was doing it. Whoa, that's just plain crazy. Story 24. Not a doc, but a few years ago, I had my gallbladder removed. 2 stories from that ordeal. Going into surgery, I was being given anesthesia. During this, I apparently looked at the tech and asked him to remove my mask from my face so I could scratch my nose. He said, "No." And I passed out halfway through my response of, "Oh." Still very out of it, getting ready to be discharged after a day of recovery. It was very bad and I was on a lot of meds. I stood up to change and could feel the incision just below my navel open. I looked down and my hand was red. There was a growing red spot on the gown. I looked up and see the color drain from my mother's face, to which I respond, "It's cool, I got this." Get back in the bed, hit the call button and say, "I don't mean to bother you, but one of my incisions appears to have reopened. I'm not in pain, but there's a fair bit of blood. If you could have someone stop by when they're free, that would be awesome." Not 15 seconds later, a nurse comes flying into the room, looks and says, "Holy crap, be right back with supplies," and flies out of the room before returning and fixing the problem. When asked why I wasn't panicking, I simply responded, "I figured I'm already in the right place for this sort of thing." Story 25. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued. My wife informed me, at least in the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well, and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did, I told her, "Mom, you have lots of dogs and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has a sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a sloth in here. How do we catch one? They're so fast." Then she tried to take my jeans off of me so I could go to sleep and I yelled, "Whoa there, Missy," when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. Story 26. 3 times. The first time was when I was 5, tonsil surgery. My family is from Norway. My grandmother always kept a pewter model of a longboat in her mantle, just to explain why a 5-year-old would wake up screaming, "Get me back to the longboat," and then apparently, to quote my mother, go all Linda Blair and the doctors when they came in to try to give me antibiotics. That was nearly 25 years ago. My family still likes to joke about me managing to shriek my head off and throw punches after having just come out of throat surgery. By age 13, I'd tamed down some, and apparently only muttered angrily at everyone while waking up. At age 26, all the fight had gone out of me, and I just cried whenever a nurse asked me the question, "How's your pain?" "Not bad. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Can you sit up for me?" Uncontrollable sobbing. "Okay then, let's get you some apple juice." Fully disconsolate. "Sounds like you've got a bit of Viking spirit in you, my friend. But hey, no surprise there, being from Norway and all." Story 27. After waking up from my wisdom tooth surgery, I remember asking my mom, "I didn't fart, did I? I had a bunch of gas before the surgery and now it's gone. I hope I didn't fart in front of the cute nurse." The cute nurse was behind me during the whole speech. Welp. Story 28. I was working in the pediatric ER and sedating a skater kid, 14 or 15. We're talking more about a wannabe suburban kid rather than a punk kind of kid that obviously joined a frat in college. His mom is there in the room as he starts waking up once we had his wrist set in the cast. His mom is a typical well-suburban mom who spends lots of time at yoga and PTA meetings, i.e. not trashy at all, and the family was well likely from a well part of town. My buddy, who was fairly hairy on his arms, etc., reached across his upper chest to grab an IV line. The kid was half asleep, raised his head up with his eyes still closed, and licked my buddy's arm with this exaggerated lick like it was an ice cream cone. Kid flops his head back onto the pillow and his mom just looks mortified in the 2 to 3 seconds that pass before he slurs out, "Man, I sure do love to lick some p-." His mom immediately turned bright red, walked out of the room, and we all busted out laughing except the guy who got licked. The ER doc was this young petite girl and she said her sides were hurting because she was laughing so hard. For months, we would give that guy lick motions in the air when we passed him in the hall and put Rolling Stone stickers on his locker, etc. I still give him crap about that from time to time. My favorite is to catch him chatting or something standing at the desk and to lean over and sniff his forearm and ask if he has been fishing. From skater boy to fisherman. Boy, do they grow up quickly. If you've made it this far and enjoyed the video, I'm sure you'll love Doctor's Most Awkward Experiences with the Opposite Gender. Still can't get over Story 12. See you on that video.